little bit more about the Cumberland River Compact's work, as well as some best practices that we have seen in creating effective and impactful stormwater education. I have been with the compact since 2017, and so I've had the opportunity over those years to get to know some of you all on the call here, as we were sort of all embarking on this journey for stormwater education. So you're welcome to add questions throughout in the chat, and I can probably, I'll be able to see some of those. I might ask you to add a couple things in the chat as we are going along as well. And then, of course, at the end, happy to answer anything in more depth as well. So, yeah. Thank you all so much. Let me just get myself all sorted here. Okay, so just to kind of give you a little bit of an introduction to the Cumberland River Compact. The Cumberland River Compact is an environmental nonprofit based in Nashville, Tennessee, working throughout the Cumberland River Basin with a vision to have clean and abundant water for the about 3 million people and thousands of species that rely on that water. And our work falls into 4 main divisions that all work together to really address root causes of water quality issues. So when I think about our work, I really think about the fact that we're looking at, what are the water quality issues that we're seeing in streams, and then we want to have some sort of program in order to address those. And so, our work falls within those divisions, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the work under these divisions as well. But we have our education and engagement division, which is the division that I oversee, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we do today. But that's really working to, connect people to nature, connect people to each other, and connecting to meaningful skills and actions. So this is a lot of the work we do with teachers, with schools, with students, with young people, as well as with community members. Our stream restoration work works to restore streams from the ground up to have, healthy habitats for that biodiversity. In urban areas, we work on the root causes of urban water quality issues, which of course obviously intersects with a lot of the work that you all do in the world of stormwater, and working to address those issues proactively alongside communities. And then finally, our working lands division works to promote practices that are good for water quality and good for soil health, often working with agriculturists working to promote good land use practices as well. So just to tell you a little bit more about some of the programs underneath each of these sort of grand divisions. First one I wanted to share a little bit about is our DPAVE program. So our DPAVE program started in about 2017, and since then we have depaved, meaning we have removed and replaced about 100,000 square feet of impermeable area. So this is, everything from kind of old parking lots to a couple parking spots to sort of a weird place of pavement that doesn't need to be there anymore. And that's about 1.5 football fields worth of pavement, just to put that in context. And so this work helps to kind of slow down, capture, and cool that stormwater before it enters into our storm drains, and often combining it with plantings of native plants, trees, and things like that. So this is a really cool initiative that we've been really scaling up over the last several years to, again, address what are those, one of the root causes of urban water quality issues. Well, it's a lot of that impervious space. So how can we, especially in our urban areas where there's not a lot of space to do things like plant trees, how can we sort of free that soil and free that land through the DPAVE program? Another program that we do is in partnership with Metro Water Services, and I'm not sure if some of our Metro Water friends hopped on. I know I saw them on the list, but we work with Metro Water Services in collaboration with Metro Nashville on the Root Nashville campaign. And this is a tree planting campaign to plant the goal is 500,000 trees across the city of Nashville by 2050. We, last I checked, I think we reached about 64,000 trees so far. And we are, even this week, actively planting a couple hundred more through either our neighborhood planting captain program, which works primarily with private landowners, people who have yards, to get trees to them so that they can plant those in their yards, as well as some of our larger scale community reforestation sites where we're planting, over 10 trees at, a business, a church, or something like that. Our stream restoration program, like I mentioned, brings back those healthy streams and stream habitats to ensure that cleaner water and protect wildlife. The way we do this is through a couple different programs that some of you all might be familiar with. One of them is that we facilitate a compensatory mitigation program, or an in lieu fee program for stream restoration that we offer in the Cumberland River Basin. And this allows us to take on larger scale stream restoration projects to ensure that we're protecting and stewarding the biodiversity of the Cumberland River Basin for future generations. So being able to do sort of those big projects. One of those big projects that we completed was in Stevens Valley, where we restored about 2.5 miles of streams and then conserved 44 acres along that stream as part of a conservation easement and protecting that in perpetuity as protected area. We also work collaboratively with municipalities on 319 non-point source pollution grants, and this is where we're also able to do a lot of smaller scale stream restoration, stream bank stabilization, as well as combine that with some of our urban waters work to really address things at a watershed level. One of our newer programs is our Mineland Reforestation Program. And in this program, we're primarily working in the headwaters of the Cumberland River Basin. So this is, Eastern Tennessee, Eastern Kentucky, as well as parts of actually Western Kentucky as well. And we are restoring soils that have been primarily heavily compacted by past mining. Even if there has been some restoration done on the site as part of requirements, that soil is typically, almost acting like pavement, not soaking any of that water. And as we know, that can lead to flooding and water quality issues. So through this program, we collaborate with private landowners to reforest their land and to be able to plant tens of thousands of native tree seedlings kind of in mass on these properties to really restore and reforest those areas. And so far, we have restored close to 200 acres of mine lands through this program. And then also through our Working Lands Division is our work to support healthy soils. So in this program, we work primarily with professionals who manage pastures, farms, grazing lands. So think about, small and mid-sized farmers. We have programs including our River Friendly Farm Certification Program, which works to certify farmers that are doing the kind of best management practices for water quality, for soil health, and for agriculture. Another program through that is our grazing school, which works to promote rotational grazing for livestock farmers and other techniques that they need in order to minimize the impact of livestock farming on the land and, of course, on the waterways as well. And then finally, kind of in our education division, just to tell you a little bit more about that, we really work to, engage future leaders, work along teachers and schools to bring crucial environmental education and water education to thousands of students. Recently, we reached a milestone of 30,000th student that we have engaged since 2018, and we also trained our 1,000th teacher across the state of Tennessee. And so those were just two really exciting milestones. Of course, showing the numbers, but also thinking about the impact that all of those teachers and students have had on caring about and stewarding our waterways now and into the future. And in particularly in this area, we are, as an education team, looking at how school districts across the state are beginning to teach more environmental science as a high school course, and collaborating deeply with school districts to support professional learning for teachers so that those environmental science courses can be as connected to what we're seeing here in our local environment and the things that are happening in their communities as possible. And then finally, just wanted to share, in connection with TNSA, I did give a similar version of this presentation at the TNSA conference this year in Chattanooga, and then did just want to thank you all again as TNSA members for selecting the Cumberland River Compact as the organization of the year in 2024. We were really delighted to receive recognition for the work that we do with Stormwater and alongside many of you all in this work. So just always want to give a chance to say thank you for that. So now you know a little bit more about our work. I kind of want to dive into what we're thinking about today in terms of stormwater education. So just to give you an overview of kind of where we're going with this presentation, and we'll talk about some community case studies of partnerships that we have done with stormwater municipalities. We'll talk about some engagement strategies and communication techniques to think about how you can bring those into your, either if you are working in an MS4 program, how you can bring those into your programs. If you're in the consulting side, if you're in the regulation side, how can you bring some of those into the conversations that you're having? Because, we're all educating and communicating all the time. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about an upcoming stormwater education workshop that will be in the spring of this year that is open to anyone across the state that's really going to dive into a lot of these things in more detail. So just as we get started, I wanted to kind of give you all a chance to reflect and I know we're virtual, but maybe if you want to put in the chat, if anybody can remember, when did you first learn about what a watershed is? And when did you first learn about stormwater? So if anyone's brave and wants to admit in the chat when they first learned about those terms, you can. I'll give you a minute or so. College, 2021, 1999, 95. Nice. I like that you guys are just going straight to dates, like amazing. Now, I don't know the ages of all of you, so I don't know if 1995 you were 5 years old or you were 35 years old. So we'll just kind of, take a best guess at that. But I do see a lot of, okay, high school internships, college, David in the disco era, would love to see that. Okay, a lot of college, right? So we were all probably like mostly adults. Everyone seems to be here, maybe a couple high school internships. But most people were kind of over the age of 18 when you first started learning about stormwater. Okay. John Ponzio saying Boy Scouts Middle School. Okay. That explains why you're in this field and you've been doing all this great work, right? So I think the reason I ask that is that it you didn't grow up knowing what stormwater and watersheds were, right? Something about what you learned, either it was in college or internship, when you got my first job in it, right? You're like, this is now what I do, and I'm going to learn about it, right? And that's how we all learn about things and look at kind of where we all are now and what did it take for you to really understand what is stormwater, what is a watershed? So I want to kind of share a little bit about my experience with this too, and show you one of my favorite pictures of myself as a child with my friend Anna there on the right. And we would go creeking in her backyard. And so we would, put on our boots, we'd get our sticks, the gloves and all that, and we would explore and race boats and turn over rocks and all of that stuff. But of course, I had no idea where that water was coming from. I didn't know where it went. I just knew she had a cool creek in her backyard and we would go play in it. And so one day when we were young, we decided that we would kind of go swimming in this little creek. And so we, decided to actually kind of submerge ourselves under the water in some of the deeper areas. We were going to go swimming. And we come back into her house, and her mom was the nicest woman in the world. And she was so mad at us, made us immediately go take showers, clean all this water off. And I remember thinking, okay, somehow we messed up, right? And I didn't know at the time why did we mess up, right? And I look back on that experience and I think about, well, okay, where did that water come from? Well, I would say about maybe like 200 yards from where she lived was the Ohio State golf course. So it was two 18-hole golf courses that, had all the things that we know happens on golf courses, and all of that water was running off into that creek. About 200, 400 yards later, that was where my friend Anna's house was with her creek. And so, now that I understand stormwater and I understand the concept of a watershed, I understand kind of why she was so upset that, we went swimming in this water that probably had a lot of things in it that we didn't want to go and see. But again, it really took that experience. And of course, that was kind of an alarming experience for myself to really start to understand what do people mean when they start to talk about stormwater. And it's a good reminder that education is not necessarily just telling people something, but it's helping people experience it. It's helping them understand it in a context that makes sense to them. And so kind of moving forward in time, these are some other photos. Before I moved here to Tennessee, I worked in Los Angeles at another watershed-based organization focused on the watershed that leads into the Santa Monica Bay. And so I would lead groups of school kids down on the beach, pretty much every day. And again, I was just at that point, this was maybe like 10 years ago, kind of starting to understand what a watershed and stormwater was. And again, I kind of heard the terms. I knew we were this watershed organization, but it wasn't until I started seeing, when they talk about a first flush, and I would see down at the beach what that meant. And I would see where the storm drains came out into the ocean, and I would start to see what that looked like. That's when it started to make more sense to me. And that's when I started to really care and think that, okay, this is something that is really important. And so, it's an important reminder to think about, what it took all of us to start to understand what stormwater and watershed was. You might have learned about it in a college class, but did you just kind of learn about it in the textbook and write the definition and move on? When did it start to kind of be more about how you think about the world? And so I think that's kind of the challenge when it comes to stormwater education, is that we have to kind of think about, well, what does it take to get somebody to not just sort of know what the definition of this term is, but actually experience it and know what it means. So back to the chat, I want you to think about, stormwater education takes time. And I know a lot of you all have come in different careers, but just add in the chat. I just want you to kind of list off, like, what are some of your day-to-day job duties? And stormwater education might be one of them. It might be somewhere lower on the list. Oh, someone also had a Heal the Bay internship. We should talk, Christina. Plan review, yes. Design, doing the actual design, plan review, love it. Construction site inspection, yeah, getting out there. Okay, communications. Sonia and Heather, you all are maybe the outliers in some of these conversations. Yeah. Yeah, listening to people's problems, trying to sort of see what they're thinking about, right? And so for a lot of you all, the inspections, the post-construction maintenance, updating ordinances, right? That's kind of often top of the list. So let's just sort of think about, well, what does that mean when you have all these things? You have your plan reviews, you have your inspections. A lot of you all mentioned on that. You might have enforcements that you or someone on your team is out doing. You're doing illicit discharge detection, right? Ordinance review and revision. Maybe many of y'all went through that the last couple of years and are hoping it continues to be a couple more years down the road before you need to come back to it, right? You have to fill out your MS4 permit, keep that up to date. Make sure you're reporting both to your, community as well as to TDEC. What are you up to, right? And then somewhere on that list for many of you all comes stormwater education, right? Whether you're in an MS4 position or you are, in an adjacent position, right? Somewhere in there might come education, whether that's when you're talking to people or serving on that planning commission, there's a component of education there. And so, education often tends to come last, especially when we are, strapped for resources and time, when we don't have the staffing to provide, dedicated education or communication staffing. But we know that it's critical for long-term success in all of these other areas that are maybe what your primary things are that you're doing every day.
Yeah, so I was talking to Barry about that. He said it was doing damage to the courthouse.
So yeah, I think that's just a good way to start to think about, well, what does it actually take to keep somebody from kind of thinking about stormwater to really understanding what it means to them every day.
I know.
So I want to talk about a couple
different
nobody asked me. And I'm sorry, I'm getting a little feedback. So I can just check that they're on mute, and I don't know that I can mute people, Charlene. So
hey, Amber.
Sorry,
Amber,
I'm trying to
find I should be on mute.
No.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you. I couldn't figure out who it was. I couldn't find it.
No, you're totally good. It happens. It happens. I just, you never want to accidentally be off mute when you think you're on mute. We've all been there before. Okay, so we'll go over some community case studies first and just talk about sort of when we think about, okay, how do we sort of take people on these journeys around understanding stormwater and the importance of water? What does that look like? And how has the Cumberland River Compact partnered with municipalities to provide stormwater education? So, again, a lot of our work is really to constructively partner with those local governments to achieve that vision. How can we as an organization provide additional support for that? And also sort of, in a world where, you're dealing with hurting contractors and developers, I see somebody said, how can the connection with our organization also help to, support the work that you're doing and, remind you all that your work matters and it's really important as well. And I'm going to talk to you about some partnerships today, and I don't want you to come away thinking that, what I'm asking you to do is partner with us in any of these really deep, holistic ways. That workshop I'll talk about at the end is kind of a way to start getting some of the things that we've learned along the way into your hands so that you can build that capacity within your community and do that on your own. So I'll talk about sort of 3 different sets of partnerships. First one being our partnership with Metro Nashville, being the longest and most robust, partnerships with Hendersonville and Gallatin, and then some partnerships with Laverne, Lebanon, and Mount Juliet as well. So within Nashville, this is being the city of Nashville is one of our largest, most robust partnerships. It started in 2009, aligning with the consent decree that the city had around uh, um, the combined sewer system and the separation of that. And it has grown and really changed a lot since then. It really focuses on supporting metro water services and particularly work with private property outreach and connection where, as a city, they aren't often able to, be in a lot of those private property spaces. And how can that partnership, how can we fill in some of those opportunities as well? It supports a lot of the existing efforts of Metro Water Services. I know for my Metro Water folks on the call, you all have a lot of great initiatives already going. And so this just provides sort of additional support and starts to also highlight the work that the city is already doing. So some of the key programs that we built in under this partnership include our Adopt a Stream program, where we help to facilitate groups that are interested in stewarding a stream with a stream that's in need and sort of provide that connection. We provide some support, and particularly in the past, provided a lot of support for residential rain gardens. So for private property owners that are interested in how they can build a rain garden at their own home. We've done educational workshops, including, more generic workshops to very specific things on, minor stream bank repair, riparian restoration, rain garden workshops, things like that. We also have 2 in-stream litter traps that have been installed throughout the city, and hopefully more soon, to capture that litter before it ends up into the Cumberland River. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the Root Nashville tree planting campaign is sort of in this partnership with Metro Water Services, and a big part of the work that is happening here in the city for water quality. So since we've launched that program, we've helped plant about 633 rain gardens. We've engaged over 155,000 residents. We've facilitated 140 stream adoptions, and of course, 64,000+ large 1-inch caliber trees planted, as well as other seedlings that have been planted as well. And then in Hendersonville and Gallatin, these 2 partnerships sort of came together as the MS4 permit was being updated and sort of a desire to align better with what that permit needs. And so these particular partnerships have focused on education for schools, for communities, for the developer and contractor community, as well as public participation under stream cleanups. And so these ones are really hyper-focused on fulfilling requirements for the MS4 program. So a couple different program highlights under these partnerships that we've done. One of them has been several what we call Welcome to Your Watershed presentations and programs. And these have been opportunities for residents to come together and start to really understand and experience and engage with what that watershed means to them. And these have been fun because they're often smaller groups where we've even kind of like sat around sort of like a kitchen table and been able to have real conversations about what they're seeing and sort of leveling the playing field among people of what their experience has been with waterways, bringing and any misconceptions they might have and really working with them to understand those together. We also do host a series of lunch and learn presentations for developer, contractor, and engineer education, in addition to partnership with Sumner County as well. And so we host regular talks that are focused for those audiences, for them to receive information that's either specific to the municipality, maybe updates to the permit or land disturbance application process, or really starting to kind of think about, well, what are the best practices and how can we sort of push the leading edge of what we're doing when we think about stormwater in these spaces and for these audiences. We also love to, again, when it comes to experiences, especially in Sumner County, you have the opportunity to be out on Old Hickory Lake. And so we've had annual kayak cleanups on Old Hickory Lake, which, we pick up trash, but also people just get to be out on a kayak on the lake and maybe see water in a way that they never have before and start to understand that watershed. Even for myself, when I've taken boat trips up and down the Cumberland River and you see where all of those waterways enter the river, it really reshapes how you understand a watershed and what, when you're looking at that map, what it actually means to experience it. And then also, that should say Gallatin Water Week, but we have also worked with the city of Gallatin on a water week that highlights local businesses, especially in their downtown core, and connects them with promoting information about clean and abundant water and actions that communities can take. So in these partnerships, between both these communities, we have reached a little over 7,000 Sumner County residents, and we've had over 50 events, including about 20, including in reaching many of the schools across Sumner County through these programs as well. And then finally, just to give you another kind of case study here, these partnerships with the cities of Laverne, Mount Juliet, and Lebanon were specifically focused on employee education. So for those of you who work in a municipality or work on, particularly on your MS4 requirements, employee education is one thing that's tucked in there, and sometimes it can be a tricky one to accomplish. And so we worked with these municipalities to provide local place-based employee education so that their employees were receiving training modules that looked like and aligned with what they were seeing every day in their job duties. So, rather than seeing a generic, example of a salt storage and a storm drain, they were seeing, well, what does salt storage and a storm drain look like in the place that I'm going to every day? What might be as unique about my facility that I need to understand and connect to stormwater? So this again highlighted those pollution prevention strategies and best management practices. Several of these included video modules, and within the city of Laverne, when we launched those, they were able to train 100% of their employees in just about 6 weeks to get everybody up to speed on what they needed to know. And I do want to highlight that for that workshop that I'll mention again a little bit more at the end, that is one of the things that we're really going to focus on with that workshop, is to provide some tools and strategies for employee education. So we'll be talking and giving you resources so that if that's an interest for your community, that you can lead and do a lot of that work on your own. Okay, so just as we kind of move into, moving from case studies and what does this kind of look like in our work and how have we partnered with municipalities, I want to talk a little bit about some different engagement strategies that and communication techniques that we have used that help to really sort of bring that stormwater education into the way that it can be as effective as possible. So just to kind of let you know where we're going, we'll talk about sort of each of these different strategies individually, knowing your audience, focusing on values, expressing the need, connecting with actions, building community, and framing your conversation. So these are good strategies kind of as we're talking through these to think about, if you manage a particular, stormwater program, these might be things that you want to think about how you embed into your practices, or it might be something that if you're not in an MS4 situation, but you're in some other sort of communication or engagement space with the work that you do, how can you sort of think about how these different tools and strategies can go into the work that you do as well? So the first one is knowing your audience. And this is something that we hear a lot. Who exactly are you trying to engage with, educate, or communicate with when you are having a conversation, let's say, about stormwater in our case. And one of the really key things is meeting people where they are. So, understanding that not everybody has had those same experiences with water, with creeks, with stormwater that we may have or think that are kind of normalized. And so being able to really start to understand and know your audience before you even start to think about, well, what am I trying to tell them? I need to know what they already know and meet them where they are. And that sometimes actually means like physically meeting people where they are. And so thinking about, what type of events you attend and, are those events where people sort of are already looped into the work that you're doing and they already are maybe kind of the advocates in your community? Or where is there an event or a place that you're going to reach a lot of new people that are, totally new to thinking about stormwater or thinking about where their local creek is or understanding what you do as the government and, in general. And so for us, what does this look like? This photo here is attending a farmer's market in Hendersonville where, people weren't necessarily coming to learn about water or the environment, but we had, we're able to be there, talk with people, learn from local residents, and really also connect the things that they did care about at the farmer's market, like, fresh and, available produce, to the work that we were doing as well. A couple other events that we have done more recently with some of our restoration and urban waters programs are either we've had Donuts and Dams events and Donuts and Deep Have, where essentially during a project that we're implementing, we just will come out to that community, bring some donuts, and just be there for an hour, for 3 hours, and just be physically present where that community is so that we can meet them where they are and hear from them, and be available for the questions that they have. And so these have been really just, they're quick, they're easy to put together, but they're fun opportunities, and to be able to meet people and have those conversations together. The next one here is, I think this is David Withers. I think that's your hand. So you made it into the presentation. Focusing on values. And what I mean by that is, really thinking about the people, once you kind of, I've identified your audience, you've met them where they are, what is it that they care about? What worries them? What motivates them? What is the thing that you might be able to find in common with them to be able to move that conversation forward? This is, again, also really important when we're thinking about the experiential aspect of learning. And so, research shows that adults learn best from experiences, and letting people explore a topic or an idea rather than just explaining it to them is what helps them build that knowledge for themselves. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we do a lot of work in sort of the formal education space. And so when I'm stepping into the world of science education, that is sort of the perspective that people are taking when it comes to teaching, young kids and students about science, is letting them explore it first and building that explanation. And it's maybe not the way that all of us were taught, but it is the way that can really build those experiences and that understanding to last. And so I think I already mentioned this a little bit, but things like our volunteer events where people are out actually connecting to nature through recreation, experiencing those waterways, getting to see that impact up close, that helps them to build that understanding. I've seen people on volunteer events and, they've picked up their 25th styrofoam cup of that day, and they say to themselves, I'm never going to use a styrofoam cup again. I can't believe I've seen so many out here, right? But how many times have they probably been told, try not to use a styrofoam cup, or try to make sure you're, putting it away precisely. But it's when they experience that it really starts to stick with them. And then expressing the need and being really specific about what is happening in your local community. And this is where, understanding your audience, what they care about, and what's happening, making that connection local. So, they may not, may not grasp the whole concept of the entire Cumberland River watershed, but maybe they understand that this one creek in their community looks a little bit different, seems a little different than maybe it has in the past, or there's been a lot of, changes in this area. What is that doing to water quality? And starting with something that they know. And then, again, trying to avoid jargon. I know this is something, we all hear a lot, and it can be really hard when we're in this space. And I just threw a couple up here that I often catch myself having to make sure I don't just use without explaining. So MS4, right? That is we love that term, but it doesn't really mean much. And even when you give all the words to it, it still doesn't really mean much. So how can we explain that in a different way? IDDE, I think, is another one that can be very complicated. BMP, and then things like requirements or TDEC requirements or permit requirements, don't often mean a lot to the general public, but how can we, translate compliance into real world relevance? Is it keeping the creek safe? Is it protecting local lakes, right? How can we sort of translate what we're thinking about, which is this is a requirement and my permit says I need to, be doing the X, Y, and Z, and how can I make that relevant? And one of the ways that we think about this in our work a lot is, thinking about that local waterway. So really trying to drill down to what that local watershed is and the problem that you're seeing. So understanding what is the impairment of a local waterway, what's happening nearby, and how does that connect? And so is it dirt? Is it, well, we might say sediment or silt, but is it dirt, right? And how can we start to connect that into what's happening in the stream that, flows from this area that we're at to where, where a resident's going to be more familiar. And then I think, one of the final steps is really connecting it with action. So what do you want somebody to do with the information that you're telling them when you're having these conversations? And each sort of educational activation might have a different action. So, you might have a whole education work simply to get people to report stormwater issues. I know in Nashville, Metro Water Services has done a great job at this, at trying to really just encourage people to use the Hub Nashville platform, to funnel requests in there, because they need to see and know what's happening out in the community. So how can we that's the one action we want people to take. Maybe in a more technical sense, it's like, this is the specific pollution prevention thing that is not happening, that we need to be, added in, needs to be included more. Maybe for a resident, it's just you want them to know the name of their local stream, right? You want them to know it's Drake's Creek or Richland Creek or Mill Creek. You want them to have that connection to it. And that's, again, one of the things that we try to do a lot, is connecting people to what is the name of that local stream, where is it, and how can you start to sort of build an experience around that. And then one of the other final things to think about is the role of community and the role of sort of the social connections among people when it comes to creating effective programs and effective impacts. And so social proof is this idea that people don't want to be alone with the things that they're doing. They don't want to be like the weird ones that are the ones that care about the waterways. That they want to know that it's the norm, that this is what people do all the time. And so you start to build that narrative that this is kind of the norm, and this is the way that we are doing this. Can help sort of build that social proof. That could be things that we see every day in media and communications and marketing, endorsements, testimonials, right? That's telling us that this is something other people are doing. And this creates that sort of validation and encouragement, for some people to follow suit. And then thinking about when you're building community and kind of connecting people to each other is who might be your best messenger. And it might not always be you, and that's okay. It might be that you need to find a different messenger for a different audience or in a different situation. One way that we've seen a lot of this is some of our work in agriculture. So in this photo here is one of the instructors that we use for our grazing school, because he's an expert in best practices for this rotational grazing and livestock management. And so, being in those communities, we knew that we wanted to be part of those conversations, but we did need an additional messenger to be in there with us. So who can those people be that can help kind of advocate alongside of you and help build that message? And then one of the last things that I always like to think about when framing sort of communication, this is more from like a holistic level, is this idea of framing your communication around a value, the problem, solution, and action. And so what I mean by that is value. What connects you and your audience, right? We talked about that a little bit, starting with that part of it. Then the problem, what is the local issue that you're addressing? What is happening in your community that you're trying to engage somebody on? And then solution, what is the solution to that? And specifically for many of you all, how does your work fit into the solution? So you want to kind of center yourself as being part of the solution. And then actions, what are those specific action steps that you want them to take so that there's more likelihood of follow-up? And so I think about this framework a lot when I'm, writing for public comment. I've used this sort of framework before for small reports, for communicating about illicit discharge, right? How do I sort of think about this framework when we are communicating what we need to connect with people on? And then I also sort of use this framework a little bit to guide this presentation. So if you think about sort of this value, problem, solution, action, we started kind of with coming to common ground, which is that at one point we all didn't know what stormwater and watersheds were. We had this sort of idea that they were important, but we all had this understanding that we needed to learn that. We found that common ground. We articulated the problem that there are various responsibilities of stormwater coordinators and stormwater managers and the work that you all do, and that stormwater education is a key effective part of that, but often can fall to the bottom of the list. And then in solutions, I talked about some of the compacts partnerships as a potential solution to this problem, thinking about how we can center, what these solutions could look like. And then actions hopefully gave you all some strategies that maybe you can just take back, think a little bit about, and how that might frame, how you can make your stormwater education the most effective and impactful as possible. All right, so I know this is virtual, but I am an educator by heart. And so I do want you to kind of give this a try because we have the time. So we'll just take like maybe 3 minutes or so. I want you to think about an audience that you work with. So I jotted some up there that are kind of in the, the permit language, right? Employees, developers, contractors, homeowners. Maybe you want to get more specific about that. Homeowners who have a stream in their yard, or homeowners who have a flooding problem. What type of person there. I want you to kind of jot down what you think would resonate with that audience. Articulate the problem. What is it that you're trying to address? How is your work part of the solution? And then what is an action that you want them to take? So just on a piece of paper, I'll give you guys a second to jot that down. And then if anybody is brave in a couple minutes, you are welcome to share. So we'll take like 2 minutes. I'm going to give you another minute, and then if you're brave and anybody wants to share out, we'll do that in a minute. Okay, I think that might have been a fast minute, but is anybody feeling brave and maybe talking through something that resonated with them that they are thinking about on how to use this? And you can just come off mute.
Hi, my name is Kahali Martinez. I work for the city of Knoxville. I actually just did this morning. I was part of the city of Knoxville. We had 60 high schoolers come to one of our buildings this morning, and it was rapid fire. I had less than 5 minutes to talk to probably a total, the kids came up in like droves of 5 each, and I gave them each my elevator speech. I do plans review for the city, but basically the value was, look, whenever there's pollution around the city, whether it's trash or oil or soil, anywhere on a construction site or in your yard or in your driveway or in a parking lot, that was the value I connected with, or I guess that's the problem I articulated. And then I told them that I make sure that developers are installing ways to capture pollution before they're able to develop, and that's what we do is plans review. And then my call to action was, hey, do you like engineering? Do you want to study engineering? Do you want to come and do this job? And a lot of them were like, no, I don't. But I tried. The other call to action would just be, hey, pick up your trash. Don't throw trash. And tell your friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's great. Well, good job on dealing with the high schoolers. They can be a lot. And yeah, they're usually not always the most engaged and enthusiastic sometimes. So,
especially when you only have 5 minutes with them. So.
Yeah, 5 minutes is not a lot of time. Yeah, I like the way that, especially when you have a complicated, solution or thing that you're doing where you're like, the action is not like, hey, come on down to the office and review some plans with me, right? Like that's probably not going to resonate with them, but thinking about, what they can do, that's part of that. And even just so that they understand, what is the government doing to address these issues that they see every day? Because most students I talk to, when you ask them, like, what do you think an issue is with water or with the environment, they're going to say trash, littering as like the top thing. And so they already probably care about it. And so helping them also see, the work that you're doing, that it plays into that as well. Does anybody else want to share anything? I see somebody added one in the chat, thinking about a contractor who's an outdoorsman who likes fishing, talks about the sediment, it's discharging into the creek, makes its way to the river, affects the fish, right? Installing your proper erosion prevention sediment control can maintain and protect your hobby on the weekends. Yeah, I love that, right? So what does that person care about? And like, who are they as a person outside of what they do every day as a job? And how can that outdoorsman sort of aspect be connected in? Anybody else want to share? I appreciate y'all jotting it down at least. Okay. Well, I will just kind of wrap up here with a couple other things. Thank you all for kind of going through that exercise with me and thinking about it. I wanted to highlight if thinking about stormwater education and communication around stormwater interests you, or if you have needs within your community, this is kind of where this stormwater education workshop hopefully will fit in for you all. So this is a workshop March 25th, 2026, so still a little bit ways away. It'll be a full day interactive workshop focused on practicing strategic communication techniques and some of these education things. So again, I can be an educator at heart, so I will bring Post-it notes. We will have big Post-it boards. It'll be fun. You'll get to kind of like practice these things that maybe you don't get to stretch yourself on every day. But we'll have time to really think about and plan and how that pulls into your stormwater education program if you are an MS4. And then one of the specific things that this workshop will focus on is localizing employee education. So we've definitely seen that employee education can kind of be a tricky one to accomplish. And so this workshop will provide you with that training and information, but then there's also an option to kind of receive materials that we will put together templates for you all that will be like PowerPoint templates, talking point outlines, customizable resources that then you can put in, what does your I keep using salt storage, but what does your salt storage look like? Or what does your best management practices look like? Where are your spill kits? So things like that are going to be able to provide that hyper localization. And so a bulk of the workshop will focus on that. So you'll be coming away with not just a little bit of extra professional development and training, but the option to have resources that you can really put into place so that you can get the expertise within your community for employee education. So there's a QR code there, but I will also put the link in the chat. So if anybody wants to save that for later. And then just as we wrap up, I'm happy to take additional questions, but that's my email address if you'd like to email me or chat about anything. The Compact's website. I also wanted to share our project portfolio, which is a great place to find additional examples of the work that we've done to improve water quality across the Cumberland River Basin. And then finally, 2 newsletters if you're interested in keeping in touch with us more. The first one here is our Streamlines newsletter, which is our kind of monthly, all general compact information newsletter. And then the second one is a Stormwater Professionals newsletter. So as I mentioned, we do those professional education programs primarily in Middle Tennessee, focus for developer contractors and engineers, but we often have a lot of MS4 folks that attend those as well. And that email link is specifically to receive notification about those upcoming workshops, so you can kind of stay in touch about that. But with that, I will just thank you all so much for coming and for listening. I'll stop sharing my screen. So if anybody has any questions or anything like that, we are happy to do that now.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Anyone else have any additional questions or information that you may need? That was I love that. That was so informational.
Hey,
You guys do
Catherine,
such awesome things. Sorry, go ahead.
this is Kahale Martinez again, City of Knoxville. Have you ever built some sort of large wow factor demonstration that captures people instead of giving them an elevator speech? Is like you show them a demonstration, just hit their heart right then and there, sort of display.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the great things about our organization, to be totally frank, is that we I sit in sort of the education space, so I'm often talking to people and doing that, but I can really show people the work that we've done, so I don't have to just say, it's really important that we reduce impervious space in the city. I can say, go to the Nashville Farmers Market downtown, walk along the parking lot, see what that looks like. I was actually just out there with some Belmont students the other day. They're wanting to see what this looks like. What does, good city design look like? So how can we kind of experience that? So I do think those big demonstration projects and being really vocal about the work that you're doing. And that really comes into kind of also our communications team, where getting the high quality photo and the videos to be able to show people what that looks like if they can't always be there in person. But for those of you who work in a municipality where you might have like a facility that you can sort of do up as an example. And again, I'll kind of just say, because in Nashville here, Metro Water Services has a new building that has every stormwater thing you could ever want to see and experience there. And so that's a place where, they're able to really highlight not just what they're telling people to do, but, we're going to walk the walk too, and we're going to show you what this looks like as well.
I almost want to build a riparian buffer zone that I can roll around on a cart and just show people.
Yeah.
I don't know, something that'll fit in like a 10 by 5 area that I can put in a truck and take off. And
yeah. And I saw Gretchen just put this in the chat, and I was going to say this too, but the Enviroscape model is a really common one that people use for demonstrations where you can see that non-point source pollution.
Yeah, I want that, but like 10 times bigger.
Yes. Yeah. Like a mobile lab of all these types of things.
So if any of y'all have that, just send it to me.
Yeah, I'll let you,
let me know.
Yeah. Yeah, 3D printing. So we do a lot with like kind of what lives in the creek, and we have a lot of samples of aquatic critters, but if you don't have access to those, there are 3D printing templates that you can 3D print, like what does a mayfly look like? And it's kind of like, again, like a cool, catchy thing, get people to come up to the table. And some libraries, like I know here in Nashville, the library has a free 3D printer that you can get things 3D printed on. And that can be another way to sort of bring that, what's catchy, what's going to get people to come up to learn more about what you're doing.
Yeah, and I have seen people make their own models and break it up into 3 pieces so they can fit it in their vehicle and then put it together once they get to the site. I have seen that before. I can't remember who's done that. It's been a long time since I've seen that, but I think it was somebody for the Little River Watershed Association, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I plan on making one. I just want to see some examples before I start.
Yeah, you may want to check with the Little River Watershed Association in Blount County. I'm not sure who's running that now, but back when I was at Keep Blount Beautiful, I believe someone had made that for them, if I'm not mistaken. That's been a while.
I see there was a question about mitigation and status of some of their projects. Is there a website for that? We don't have like a publicly facing like on our website status of those different projects. But for those compensatory mitigation projects, they obviously are very long term. So we might be started on them in one year, and they might take several, years to start to break ground with all of the permitting process that has to go into those. But if there's any one in particular, I'm happy to connect you with our staff that have more information about the current status of those.
Hi, Catherine. I have Kate Klima from Knox County. I have a question about how you get buy-in for people to do projects on their property, whether it's, municipal property or parks property or even personal property, for when you're doing for your rain garden program, for example. It seems difficult sometimes to incentivize people. Native plants aren't always, the most attractive, and the benefits are not as concrete or easily understandable sometimes as you'd like them to be. So what are your strategies for, advertising that and, making that something great that they can, an asset for their property?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely takes time. And just like anybody, we've run into roadblocks of projects that we think would be really great, but the landowner isn't necessarily interested in that. I think one thing that has been really beneficial is just, again, in encouraging, as you build that community of people that are connected to the work that you're doing, that they feel like they have some agency, and being able to have the different benefits done to sites that they see. So I see this a lot in both the Route Nashville campaign as well as in the DPAVE program, where we have a fairly large staff, but we don't have people to go out to every single place and find all of these sites that we need. And so we really have to work with people to help them say, hey, we have the technical expertise, and we might have the funding and resources, we have the project management experience, but how can people feel empowered to let us know where they see places that they want improvements? And so, a couple of our recent DPAVE projects, one at a restaurant in North Nashville called T.O. Fun, that was kind of somebody in the community thought, hey, this would probably be a good site for this. I sort of know the business owner. Let me see if I can help make that happen, right? Or another community member who we'd worked with for a really long time. She had a slip lane in her neighborhood that, people could turn right without stopping, and it was dangerous and it wasn't really necessary. And so, she knew that we could help make that come together. And so being able to kind of work with those people is huge. And then I think that, for some of those more complicated projects, again, that just really kind of steadfast and continuous open communication, and explaining to them what the solution is going to be in a way that relates to them. And I think about this with a dam removal project that we've been working on in Southeast Nashville for several years, and it's been an issue beyond even when we were working on the project. And we really had to kind of learn what did the community even know about this site? Did they care about these ponds? Did they not care about them? What did they know about them? And what were really the issues that were sort of top of mind with them? And how could we kind of help assuage their concerns on those, while also still kind of, executing what we were interested in? And that takes, it does take a lot of kind of time and careful relationship management. But I think that can start to make progress in those areas. I know we're at